Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for a deep dive?
Always am. What are we digging into this time?
Bitcoin, central banks, the whole financial shebang. We're breaking down a recent Bitcoin hard talk with Simon Dixon. Heard of it,
Oh yeah, Dixon's always good. Speaks his mind.
doesn't he? This episode was no different. We're talking regulatory showdowns, global power plays, the
How
works.
intense.
It gets pretty wild.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, Dixon jumps into this Coinbase lawsuit. SEC's coming after them, and BlackRock's caught up in it somehow.
Yeah, that Coinbase case is fascinating. The SEC claims Coinbase is letting BlackRock use Bitcoin held for ETF investors improperly, but Coinbase denies it. The whole thing really shines a light on how traditional finance is trying to muscle into the crypto space.
Like, they see this decentralized system gaining traction and think, time to assert some control.
Exactly, which ties into a big theme for Dixon. Self-custody. He's all about owning your Bitcoin directly, no third parties, no ETFs. Self-custody. I've heard that term thrown around, but to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on the details. What's the rundown and why is Dixon so adamant about it?
Basically, it's like having a digital wallet right there on your phone or computer where you hold your Bitcoin. You control the keys, which are like passwords, so you have complete control. Dixon believes it's crucial for true financial independence, free from governments, central banks, anyone.
So, like keeping your cash at home versus in a bank.
Pretty much, you become your own bank. Of course, you're also responsible for security. Lose your keys, you've lost your Bitcoin.
High stakes. But I see how it ties into Bitcoin's whole decentralization thing, directly challenges the systems Dixon's skeptical of.
Absolutely. And it's not just him. Lots of people, even outside the Bitcoin community, share that skepticism. Remember BlackRock from that Coinbase case?
Yeah, they're the ones who might be in hot water.
Right. Well, they put out this paper recently calling Bitcoin a risk-off asset. Ironic, isn't it?
A bit. So they're admitting Bitcoin could be a safe haven from the very system they're deeply involved in.
Precisely. They're acknowledging its potential as a hedge against traditional market instability, geopolitical risks, even central bank actions.
It's like they're trying to have it both ways, dipping their toes in the Bitcoin pool while acknowledging it might be the lifeboat if the whole ship goes down.
It's a complicated situation for sure. Speaks to the uncertainty of things right now.
The financial world's playing 4D chess while we're still trying to figure out checkers.
And the stakes are huge. This isn't just a U.S. thing either. Dixon talks about China's economic policies starting to mirror the Fed's, and then there's the BRICS nations.
BRICS! That's about Brazil, Russia? Are we talking about the World Cup now?
Not quite, though they might wish they were doing that well right now. We're talking Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're banding together trying to challenge the U.S. dollar's dominance.
Whoa, okay, so now we're talking about a potential global power shift.
Now, things are getting interesting.
A global power shift makes you wonder what's going to happen to, well, everything, doesn't it? Especially with Dixon dropping these provocative terms. Ponzi schemes, proof of weapons networks. He wasn't holding back on the central bank critiques.
No, he definitely wasn't. A little dramatic, maybe, but there are real criticisms there if you unpack it a bit.
Okay, so unpack it for me. What's he really saying when he calls central banks Ponzi schemes?
Well, he's talking about their ability to manipulate currency, to control interest rates. He argues the whole system, especially the reliance on debt, it's unsustainable. Only benefits those already at the top, you know?
So the little guy's left holding the bag when it all inevitably falls apart.
That's the idea. And then the proofs of weapons thing, that's where it gets even more interesting. He connects central bank policy, particularly the Fed's, directly to funding military action.
Wait, is he saying war is profitable?
Kind of, yeah. He points to things like, look at the military budgets, the influence of defense contractors. Conflict means more government spending, more borrowing, which ultimately benefits.
The ones holding the purse strings.
Exactly.
It's a lot to process. Honestly, kind of scary.
But how does Bitcoin, this whole decentralized system, how's that any different?
That's the appeal for a lot of people. It operates outside of all that. No governments, no central banks calling the shots. Dixon sees that as its biggest strength.
An escape hatch from a system that's rigged. But if these central banks are so powerful, wouldn't they just shut Bitcoin down completely?
They've tried. But because it's decentralized, it's really resilient. No central server, no single point of failure. Dixon thinks they've realized they can't beat it, so now they're trying to co-opt it. ETFs, regulations, all that.
Which takes us back to self-custody. If you really want to control your own Bitcoin, you got to hold it yourself.
Yeah.
Can't rely on these institutions, right?
Right. He sees self-custody as essential for preserving what Bitcoin's all about. Individual control, financial freedom, all that.
David versus Goliath, but with digital currency. But let's say, hypothetically, Bitcoin does become the global currency. What happens to, well, everything we know? Governments, central banks, what happens to them? Million-dollar question right there. No easy answer. Some people think it'll be a more equitable world, power's distributed, individuals have more control.
Yeah, or it all goes to hell, right? Anarchy in the streets, Mad Max, the whole 9 yards.
Some people definitely see it that way. But it's not just about Bitcoin, is it? Dixon's point about the BRICS nations, that adds a whole other layer.
Seemed like he was onto something there. Almost like he thought the BRICS thing could be a hedge, even for those in power if the dollar goes belly up.
It's a theory. The BRICS haven't exactly been quiet about their issues with the U.S.-dominated system. And it's not just talk. Look at what they're doing.
Right, that payment system, the commodity-backed reserve currency, they're serious.
They are. And their economies combined, that's a lot of weight to throw around. But can they actually dethrone the dollar? That's the big question. It's so deeply entrenched.
Like trying to move a mountain.
Pretty much. Even Dixon had his doubts,
He did seem a bit skeptical.
He mentioned other attempts at alternative currencies, Venezuela's petro, things like that. Didn't really pan out.
So healthy skepticism is probably a good thing. But even if BRICS doesn't replace the dollar outright, couldn't it still shake things up? More competition, at least.
Oh, absolutely. That's how disruption works.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't completely topple the old guard, it forces change, creates options. We could be looking at a much more fragmented world, which, if you're on board with Dixon's thinking,
might not be a bad thing at all. He does seem to like his systems decentralized.
It's a common thread, right? Centralized power, whether it's governments, institutions, he sees it as inherently vulnerable. Decentralization, that's the safeguard.
Well, it's a lot to think about. This deep dive has been intense, to say the least. Feels like we're at a turning point, financially speaking. Bitcoin, BRICS, who knows what else is coming down the pipeline.
That's why it's important to be aware, right? Even if it seems complicated, overwhelming. Don't just accept the way things are.
Ask questions. Do your homework.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, especially now. The more you understand, the better prepared you'll be for whatever comes next.
Couldn't agree more. So keep learning, stay curious, and
don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. You never know, you might stumble onto the next big thing.
Love it. On that note, we'll leave you to it.
Good.
Until next time, happy exploring.